Hey guys, tonight we drift way back in time. Before golden apples, wooden horses, or thunderbolts thrown like tantrums, the air is thick with mist, and the world isn't a world yet. It's more like a soggy cosmic stew swirling with shadow and chaos and vaguely threatening harp music. So, before you get really comfortable and fall asleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time is it where you are? I find it super interesting to see who's joining you from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on the fan for that gentle hum. And let's go on tonight's journey together. You can't see much. Just clouds and vibes, honestly, but you can feel something moving beneath the surface. Something old, something dramatic. You're not floating on land because there isn't any. No oceans yet either, just an infinite expanse of dark. The Greeks called it chaos. And no, not the fun nightclub kind. This chaos was the great yawning nothing from which all things sprang. Kind of like your laundry pile, but eternal. Out of this murky void slither the first entities. Gaia, Earth. Tartarus, the creepy underworld pit. Nyx, night. Erebus, darkness. And Eros, not the fun love god yet. This version's more of a cosmic urge to make stuff exist. They don't have faces or bodies or TikToks, but they do have vibes. And those vibes are fertile. Gaia, our literal Mother Earth, does what any lonely proto-being might do in a void. She makes a friend. Actually, she makes a friend. Uranus, the sky, is born out of her and then joins her. Yep, buckle in. Greek myths love a closed-loop family tree. Together, Gaia and Uranus start pumping out children like it's an Olympic event. First come the Titans, massive beings with names like Oceanus, Rhea, and Cronus, remember him? Then come the Cyclops, those one-eyed blacksmiths who will eventually invent thunder. And finally, the Hecatoncheires, terrifying creatures with 100 arms and 50 heads each. You don't even want to think about what their family dinners look like. Uranus, seeing how powerful his kids are, gets nervous. Typical dad move. Instead of going to therapy, he shoves the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires back inside Gaia. Not metaphorically, literally. She's understandably not thrilled. Here's your first mainstream historical fact to chew on mid-float. Many scholars believe these early myths reflect ancient agricultural cycles. Gaia, Earth producing crops. Uranus, sky, hovering above. Storms, Cyclopes, stirring underground. Fertility, power, and suppression. It's all symbolic and slightly unhinged. But here's a quirky fringe tidbit. Some fringe mythologists argue that the Hecatoncheires might represent volcanoes. All that fire, pressure, and uncontainable rage fits the bill. Makes lava monster with 50 heads sound less like a fever dream, more like ancient geology class with better sound effects. Now, Gaia, being a resourceful primordial deity, doesn't just stew in resentment. She plots. She crafts a sickle out of magical flint, no sharp edges required in Mythland, and asks her Titan sons to deal with their deadbeat sky dad. Only one says yes, Cronus. You know the type. Confident, ambitious, probably smug. When Uranus descends to cuddle, EW, Cronus leaps out and uses that sickle to castrate him. Yup. No anesthesia, no warning, just divine snip-snip in the dark. The blood of Uranus rains down and creates a few new horrors. The Furies, vengeful ladies with snake hair. The Giants and the Meliae, or tree spirits. His bits, tossed into the sea, bubble into Aphrodite later, but don't skip ahead. Historians still argue whether this whole Sky Father loses his job and genitals. Storyline reflects a political metaphor for shifting power structures in early Greek society. Was it a coded warning about overreaching kings? An allegory for youth revolting against the old gods? Or did some ancient bard just really enjoy shock value? Either way, Cronus is now the king of the universe. He marries his sister Rhea, again, Greek mythology, where the family tree is more like a wreath, and starts having kids of his own. But guess what? He's paranoid. Like, eats his own children, paranoid. Because Gaia and Uranus, Team Trauma, prophesies that Cronus will be overthrown by one of his sons. This is the part where you clutch your plush blanket and whisper, "Oh no, not again." So, as Rhea gives birth, one by one, Cronus gulps them down. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all down the hatch. No burps, no guilt. That is, until baby number 6. Rhea's done. She's not raising another appetizer. So she swaddles a rock, hands it to Cronus, who is apparently not picky, and smuggles the real baby, Zeus, off to a cave on the island of Crete. There, he's raised by nymphs and a magical goat named Amalthea, who nourishes him with divine milk and probably tells him bedtime stories like this one. And that's where we leave you, drifting through the mist, watching a toddler god kick his chubby feet under a starry cave ceiling while his father snores post-rock snack. You're still floating, cradled somewhere between myth and moonlight, when the cave begins to echo with baby giggles and goat bleats. Zeus is growing fast, too fast. One day he's suckling divine milk, the next he's wrestling thunderbolts like they're pool noodles. You peek through the cave entrance just in time to see a celestial nanny ducking as lightning hits a tree for the 3rd time that morning. She sighs. You do too. Eventually, Zeus becomes a full-grown god with main character energy. He's charming, a bit arrogant, and very into justice, but mostly into himself. He knows his siblings are still trapped inside Dad Cronus' stomach, and he's not cool with that. So, with the confidence of a trust fund kid who also controls the weather, he decides it's time to overthrow the old man. First, he assembles a team. This isn't some solo hero gig. Zeus recruits Metis, a clever titaness known for her wisdom and potions. You hover nearby as she brews something suspiciously fizzy, a concoction designed to make Cronus very nauseous. Zeus disguises himself, probably wearing a toga and some cool shades, and offers Cronus a refreshing drink. One chug later, Cronus is writhing on the floor, belching up fully grown gods like it's a frat party gone mythologically sideways. Out pop Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, blinking in the daylight for the first time in centuries and somehow not totally traumatized. Family reunion complete, the kids now face the ultimate glow-up opportunity. A full-scale divine civil war. It's Zeus and his siblings versus the Titans. Gods versus their aunts, uncles, and estranged family members who all look like they lift. Welcome to the Titanomachy. Here's your mainstream historical fact. This decade-long battle is believed to reflect ancient cultural shifts, from older Earth-based religions, symbolized by the Titans, to the newer sky-focused Olympian deities. Basically, the myths encoded the religious turf wars of early Greek society. Thunder versus soil. Storm versus stone. But let's toss in a weird tidbit, shall we? According to some obscure sources, Zeus didn't just fight with lightning and brute force. He may have also weaponized sound. Yes, apparently his goat nannies invented clanging bronze shields together to create terrifying noise that spooked enemies and covered baby cries. This noise tactic allegedly returns in the war, dialed up to 11. Early surround sound warfare. The actual war is a mess. The Titans live on Mount Othris, the Olympians on Mount Olympus. You drift from peak to peak, catching glimpses of divine brawls. Hades invents the helmet of invisibility. Yes, that one. Poseidon floods half the battlefield out of spite, and Zeus unleashes thunder like he's trying to break the weather app. For a while, it's a stalemate. The Titans have size, age, and serious grudge energy. But the Olympians have innovation, and Gaia, bless her eternal patience, whispers a little tip to Zeus. You want to win? Unleash your uncles. The Hecatoncheires, remember them? The 100-handed, 50-headed chaos crew? Still locked away and probably very bored. Zeus, having developed both empathy and an eye for good weapons, descends into Tartarus, frees them, and immediately gives them rocks the size of temples to throw. It's a game changer. You watch one of them hurl a boulder into the sky with the elegance of a ballerina on creatine. And the Cyclopes, freed as well, are grateful enough to forge Zeus his signature thunderbolts, Poseidon a trident, and Hades a helmet that makes him basically a ghost with a grudge. Not bad for a post-prison gift bag. Historians still argue whether the Titanomachy represents a symbolic ritual of succession, a mythic codification of generational turnover, or just really creative storytelling to justify why some gods rule and others got exiled. Whatever the truth, the battle ends with the Olympians on top. The Titans are defeated and, depending on the version, either flung into Tartarus, which you pass by on your float, still a pit of screaming chaos, or placed under heavy surveillance in distant lands. Atlas, poor guy, gets the worst gig, holding up the sky. You float near him for a moment. His muscles are shaking, and he's muttering something about needing better union representation. With the war over, the gods do what all new regime leaders do. They divide the world like a pizza. Zeus takes the sky, no surprise. Poseidon claims the sea, and Hades accepts the underworld with the quiet resignation of a man who just wants some peace and quiet. Earth remains neutral ground shared by all, which sounds good in theory until they start interfering with humans constantly. Olympus is now the divine HQ, perched high above the mortal world. It's a cloud palace full of gold, nectar, and absolutely zero HR guidelines. You float above the front steps as gods begin to decorate their thrones, each more dramatic than the last. Zeus's is gold and thunder crackly. Hera's has peacock feathers and built-in side-eye. Poseidon's has seaweed cup holders. There's a strange peace, but only surface level. Underneath the divine glitter, you feel the tension building. These aren't benevolent, quiet gods. They squabble, they plot. They fall in love and out of it and back into it, usually with mortals. Olympus is less utopia, more divine soap opera with lightning bolts. Still, for now, you can rest. The war is over. The sky feels bigger. The stars above you shimmer with smugness. You drift past a cloud shaped like a goat, and somewhere in the distance, Cronus, exiled and brooding, dreams of chewing again. You hover just above the clouds now, where the air is thin and the divine drama is thick. Mount Olympus sparkles like it was made in a celestial Pinterest board. Gleaming marble columns, pools of ambrosia, and clouds so fluffy you're tempted to bite them. The gods have moved in, claimed their thrones, and settled into roles that are absolutely going to backfire later. But tonight, we zero in on Cronus, that titan turned kid-eater turned unemployed dad. He's been banished to the edge of the cosmos depending on the version you pick. Either imprisoned in Tartarus or haunting the West like some moody mythological ghost. Either way, he's not winning Father of the Year. You remember this guy. Paranoid, power-hungry, a little too into oral fixation. Now he's brooding somewhere cold and forgotten, chewing metaphorical rocks instead of literal children. Meanwhile, Zeus is settling into his new role as cosmic CEO, and like any CEO, he starts by rewriting the narrative. Cronus? Villain. Zeus? Hero. You? Just trying not to get hit by a rogue thunderbolt. The whole child-eating thing didn't start with Cronus, by the way. That motif shows up in multiple ancient cultures, often symbolizing oppressive regimes snuffing out potential before it grows. In Cronus's case, it's fear of prophecy, wrapped in crunchy baby blankets. But get this. One fringe interpretation says Cronus wasn't evil, just misunderstood. According to some Orphic texts, he was a god of time, Kronos, and his devouring was metaphorical. Time consumes all things, including his own children. Philosophical? Yes. Comforting? Not at bedtime. Anyway, Cronus is out of the picture, which means Zeus has full authority, and he wastes no time building a brand. First order of business, marry his sister Hera. because, boundaries are for mortals. Hera is elegant, calculating, and absolutely not here for Zeus's nonsense. But she agrees to the marriage, probably hoping she can at least keep him in line. Spoiler. She can't. Still, Olympus throws a wedding party that makes Coachella look like a school assembly. Gods from every realm show up with flashy gifts. The earth sends golden apples. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, forges Hera a throne that's suspiciously sticky. We'll get back to that one later. There's ambrosia, harp music, and somewhere in the corner, Dionysus is inventing rosé. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Weddings in ancient Greece weren't just personal, they were political. Marriages often symbolized alliances between cities or gods, and myths like Zeus and Hera's union served as models for balance between male power and female authority. In theory. In practice, Zeus cheats like it's an Olympic event. And speaking of children, the gods don't waste time. They start popping up like mushrooms after rain. Some are born the traditional way. Others spring from heads, sea foam, or fully formed out of sheer plot necessity. Greek mythology has no chill when it comes to divine birth, but one birth in particular changes everything. Zeus, after conquering the universe and sort of settling down, gets involved with Metis, that clever Titaness who helped him defeat Cronus. A prophecy warns that any child born of her would overthrow him, just like he did to Cronus. And what does Zeus do? You guessed it. He swallows her whole. Apparently he learned nothing from his father's mistakes, except that cannibalism is fine if you chew with purpose. Metis, instead of dissolving, builds a baby inside his head. Not metaphorical, literal. Over time, Zeus develops a splitting headache so intense, he begs Hephaestus to crack open his skull with an axe. That's trust. Or desperation. And from the split emerges Athena, fully grown in shining armor, shouting a battle cry. No goo, no trauma. Just instant war goddess, like a Greek Amazon Prime delivery. Athena is Zeus's favorite, partly because she never tries to overthrow him, partly because she sprang from his own brain like a divine brainchild, and partly because she never loses. She's wisdom, strategy, and just enough sass to make mortals nervous. Historians still argue whether Athena represents the shift from brute force to strategic intelligence in Greek warfare. Did she symbolize the rise of democratic Athens? A cultural push for wisdom over war? Or was she just an awesome excuse for artists to paint ladies in helmets? Meanwhile, the other Olympians eye Zeus's parenting style, if you can call brain birth parenting, and decide to get creative themselves. You drift through the divine nursery where kids range from terrifying to adorable. Ares, the god of war, constantly fighting with invisible enemies. Hermes, baby thief and future god of travel, already sneaking sandals. And Apollo, who tries singing lullabies to himself in the mirror. Back in the clouds, Zeus is trying to play both king and dad, but the throne keeps wobbling. The Titans are defeated, sure, but resentment lingers. And Hera? She's already planning ways to sabotage Zeus's side projects. Not out of jealousy, well, okay, some jealousy, but because chaos is basically Olympus's love language. One light joke per 500 words? You're way ahead. But here's one more. If Zeus had a parenting book, it'd be called How to Raise Gods Without Getting Overthrown. Probably. You chuckle softly in your dreamlike haze, knowing he's already failed that test. From your perch, Olympus glows gold and stormy. The gods are in power now, but power, as always, doesn't guarantee peace. The skies rumble, the ocean broods, and somewhere in the underworld a helmet of invisibility gleams. You drift lower now, letting the thunderclouds thin as Olympus becomes background noise. The marble spires fade into soft mist, and what you hear instead is the slow, deliberate rumble of war drums. Distant but steady. The Titanomachy might be over, but peace was never part of the godly business model. There's always another fight, another prophecy, another deeply personal feud, disguised as a cosmic necessity. Right now, it's Zeus, pacing his gleaming throne room like a king, with too many secrets and not enough patience. You hover beside a golden column as he sighs and stares at the horizon, brooding in full dramatic silhouette. The giants are rising. See, remember that little detail from back when Cronus overthrew Uranus? Yeah, that moment. Uranus's blood soaked into the earth, and from that disturbingly fertile mess, the Gigantes were born. Not the Titans, not the Olympians. Something else. Tall, angry, earthborn beings with serpents for legs and a serious grudge against authority. The Gigantomachy, as it's called, isn't quite war. It's more like a divine reminder that the gods don't get to rule uncontested. The giants are rough around the edges, don't play by divine rules, and absolutely do not RSVP to invitations. One of them, Alcyoneus, is technically immortal as long as he stays on his home turf. Kind of like a divine boss fight with location-based damage. Zeus is nervous. He calls a council, all the gods attending in full glam. Poseidon trails salt water across the floor. Athena taps her spear like it's a pencil, and Ares keeps flexing in the polished shields. They agree to fight, of course. How could they not? But they also need a secret weapon, a mortal. That's where you meet Heracles. More on him later. Just know this. Half god, strong as 10 oxen, and probably overcompensating for something. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Gigantomachy was a favorite subject of ancient Greek art. It symbolized the triumph of order, Olympians, over chaos, giants, and was often carved into the walls of temples as a reminder that civilization comes at a cost. The Parthenon, for instance, is basically one long flex about this fight. But the quirky tidbit, some versions say Athena straight up drops a mountain on a giant to win. Like, no divine lightning, no clever trick, just oops, this boulder fell on you. Low-tech, brutal, efficient. The battle rages for days, maybe centuries, depending on your dream timeline. You float just above it all, watching flames lick the sky and gods toss elements like juggling balls. Hades sends spirits to confuse the enemy. Apollo blindfolds them with sunlight. Dionysus, in true chaotic fashion, drives a chariot pulled by panthers and hurls grapevines like spears. And then comes the twist. Just as things begin to turn against the gods, Zeus unleashes Typhon. Or maybe Typhon rises on his own. It's not entirely clear. Historians still argue whether Typhon was a last-ditch creation by Gaia to avenge the giants, or a primordial being from deep within Tartarus, awakened by the noise and nonsense above. Either way, Typhon is massive. A monster so huge that his head scrapes the stars and his voice makes the earth quake. He's got hundreds of heads, wings like storm clouds, and hands that stretch across continents. Picture a kaiju, but make it ancient Greek and somehow worse. Even Zeus panics. And when Zeus panics, things get spicy. You follow as the gods scatter. Many flee to Egypt, yes, that Egypt, where they hide in the forms of animals. Zeus turns into a ram, Apollo a crow, and Artemis becomes a cat. This part of the myth, weirdly, is one of the oldest links between Greek and Egyptian religious crossover. Actual temples in Egypt record Greek gods appearing in beast forms, myth and politics, interwoven like gold threads in a tapestry. But Zeus, being Zeus, eventually pulls himself together. He rallies. He flings thunderbolt after thunderbolt at Typhon, and the sky turns blinding white with heat and fury. The final blow comes when Zeus drops Mount Etna on top of him. Yes, that Mount Etna, which still erupts to this day. So, the Greeks, in their wonderfully poetic way, explained a real volcano as a divine prison lid, keeping Typhon from waking up and screaming again. Don't tell geology. The war ends. Again. The giants defeated, Typhon buried. You'd think that would settle things, but Olympus is Olympus. There are always consequences. The gods return home tired but smug. Zeus sits a little taller. Athena polishes her helmet a little brighter. Even Hera pretends she didn't momentarily become a cow in Egypt. But things feel different. There's a new tension in the air. The gods may rule the sky, the sea, and the dead, but the land remembers. Gaia doesn't forget. And the mortals? They're starting to tell their own stories now. Before you were floating through chaos and divine drama, but now you feel the world shifting beneath you. Toward prophecy, toward fate, and toward the human world the gods love to meddle in. You float lazily above Mount Olympus again, where the war drums have finally fallen silent, replaced by soft lyre music and the occasional divine snore. Peace at last. Well, relative peace. Because even in their downtime, the gods are like toddlers with too much sugar and zero supervision. And the one thing they don't have? An HR department. You glide past columns of white marble and peek into divine courtrooms that don't really handle disputes so much as escalate them. There's no official complaint form when a sibling turns your sacred bird into a hat, or when your husband impregnates a cloud. Everyone's too powerful, too impulsive, and just a little too dramatic to share a mountaintop in harmony. Zeus is still king, of course. He sits on his thunderbolt-shaped throne, pretending to listen to petitions while doodling lightning bolts in the air. Hera, his wife and sister, yes, still weird, sits beside him, not speaking, but judging. She's the goddess of marriage, which is ironic, because her own marriage is a disaster in progress. Let's talk about that, shall we? See, Zeus has a wandering eye. And not just wandering, jetpacking across dimensions kind of wandering. He's turned himself into a swan, a bull, a shower of gold, even an eagle, all in the name of seduction, though the stories tend to walk a blurry, uncomfortable line. Greek myths didn't come with consent disclaimers, unfortunately. Hera knows. She always knows. But instead of punishing Zeus, who just shrugs and storms away, she usually targets his lovers and their children. This makes her one of the most complicated figures in mythology. A goddess of loyalty, who often lashes out in jealous rage, not because she's cruel, but because she's trapped in an endless cycle of betrayal and retaliation. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, marriage wasn't about love. It was about alliances, status, and control, especially for women. Hera embodies this cultural paradox, worshipped as the ideal wife, yet constantly betrayed in her own marriage. Divine irony at its finest. And the quirky tidbit of the night? One of Hera's punishments involved turning a woman named Io into a cow and having her guarded by Argus, a giant with 100 eyes. When Argus was eventually slain, Hera took his eyes and stuck them on a peacock. That's why peacocks have those shimmering eye patterns on their feathers. Petty? Yes. Iconic? Absolutely, but enough of marriage drama. Let's explore the rest of Olympus's dysfunctional family. There's Ares, god of war, son of Zeus, and Hera. He's all muscles and zero strategy. Think, fight first, shrug later. The other gods don't like him much, and mortals aren't thrilled either. But there's something tragically charming about him, especially when he sulks after losing a battle. Then we've got Hermes, the messenger god. He's young, slick, wears winged sandals, and lies for a living. His job is to shuttle messages between gods and mortals, and he does it with the gleeful chaos of someone who's just stolen your wallet and charmed you into thanking him for it. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, is quieter, wiser. She keeps her distance from the Olympus party scene, preferring to walk among golden fields and rolling grain. She'll have her own moment later, one that changes the seasons, but tonight she's just sewing and watching like she knows what's coming. And then there's Hephaestus, the god who never quite fits. Hephaestus is the only Olympian who limps. In some stories, he was thrown from Olympus as a baby because he was born ugly. In others, it's because he dared to stand up to Zeus, or maybe to Hera, depending on the version. Either way, he falls for a day and a night, crashes into the ocean, and is raised by sea nymphs who teach him to craft. He returns to Olympus not with revenge, but with talent, forging magical weapons, automatic statues, golden servants. He's the god of fire, metallurgy, invention. And despite his limp and his quiet demeanor, he becomes a force the others need. You peek into his smoky forge where sparks fly and a mechanical bird hops across the anvil, chirping softly. Hephaestus wipes his brow and smiles. He likes his machines better than his family, honestly. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus reflects the role of disabled craftsmen in ancient society, respected for skill, yet marginalized for their differences. Some say he was inspired by real blacksmiths, who limped from years of heavy labor. Others think he symbolizes the painful price of creative genius. Either way, he builds Olympus, and no one thanks him nearly enough. As for who he marries, that'd be Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, love, and just the right amount of chaos. Their union is arranged because of course it is. And surprise, she's not faithful. But we'll get to her next time. Tonight, you float above Olympus like a drowsy bird, listening to the petty whispers, the clinking goblets, the faint hum of enchanted forges. The gods are flawed, dramatic, petty, but strangely familiar. They fight, they fall, they flirt, they forge. And none of them, not a single one, has filled out a single HR complaint form. You're gliding now through a strange hush over Olympus, that quiet tension right before something glorious or disastrous happens. The divine bickering has died down for the moment, replaced by an eerie kind of anticipation. Somewhere below, Hephaestus' forge crackles quietly, and somewhere above, Zeus is about to experience a very inconvenient headache. See, here's the setup. After swallowing Metis, the goddess of wisdom, because prophecy, remember, Zeus figured the problem was solved. No child, no overthrow. Classic patriarch logic. But Metis didn't disappear. She kept existing inside his head, possibly sighing loudly while building a full-grown, armor-clad goddess inside her ex's skull. So now you're hovering nearby as Zeus paces across his marble throne room, holding his temples, muttering about pressure and some kind of divine sinus infection. The other gods are pretending not to notice, but it's getting hard to ignore the bolts of pain shooting out of his ears. At last, Zeus groans and drops to his knees. And who gets the honor of helping him? Hephaestus, of course. The one god who doesn't get squeamish at the thought of cracking open the king of Olympus like a cosmic coconut. He lifts his hammer, gently, then not so gently, and wham. From Zeus's forehead springs Athena, fully grown, fully armed, fully unbothered. She doesn't cry. She doesn't stumble. She steps out of his skull like she's been doing this all her life, eyes already scanning for battle plans. Her armor glints like polished moonlight. Her shield radiates calm control. And even the owl perched on her shoulder looks smug. It's not just a birth, it's a statement. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Athena was one of the most beloved deities in ancient Greece. The Parthenon in Athens was built in her honor, and her image, helmet, spear, owl, symbolized wisdom, justice, and power. She was the city's patron, its protector, and its philosophical ideal. But here's your weird tidbit of the night. In some older myths, Athena was originally an Egyptian war goddess named Neith, who crossed into Greek mythology during trade exchanges. She got a makeover, kept the wisdom vibes, and dropped into Olympus like a boss. Athena quickly establishes herself as not just a war goddess, but a strategic war goddess. She's not about chaos or rage, that's Ares' thing. She's about logic, tactics, winning with the fewest casualties and the most flair. She's also fiercely independent, famously unmarried, and allergic to nonsense. You trail her as she walks the halls of Olympus for the first time, nodding once to Zeus, who's icing his forehead, and ignoring everyone else. Gods bow, mortals tremble. Even Hera, queen of Side-Eye, raises an eyebrow in grudging respect. But Athena doesn't stay on Olympus for long. She prefers the mortal world, especially Athens, the city that would come to bear her name. According to myth, the city once belonged to Poseidon, who, never one to let go of a grudge, decided to fight for it. He and Athena agreed to a divine contest. Whoever gave the city a better gift would win. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident and made a saltwater spring erupt. Not super useful, but dramatic. Athena, on the other hand, planted the first olive tree, a gift of food, oil, and wood. The people chose wisely. You drift through ancient Athens as the olive trees begin to bloom. They whisper wisdom in the wind. Merchants press oil into amphorae. Soldiers rub it on their shields. The whole city glows with Athena's calm authority. Meanwhile, Poseidon sulks. As usual. Back on Olympus, Athena watches it all from a marble balcony, eyes thoughtful. She isn't flashy. She doesn't crash weddings or throw parties. But when the gods argue, she listens. And when they fall apart, as they always do, she's the one who steps in with a plan. Historians still argue whether Athena's masculine energy was empowering or restrictive. She's often depicted as a woman who succeeds by rejecting emotion, softness, and traditional femininity. Was she a symbol of empowerment? Or a product of patriarchal storytelling that only respected women who played by male rules? You decide that's too much brain work for bedtime, and instead float gently around her temple, where the scent of olive wood mingles with cool stone. Down below, Athena once helped heroes. Many heroes. She guided Perseus to slay Medusa, told Odysseus how to outwit monsters, and probably rolled her eyes through Heracles' whole 12 labors arc. Her wisdom was practical, sharp, occasionally sarcastic. One version even claims she invented the flute, but gave it up when she saw how it puffed up her cheeks. Relatable. And if you're wondering whether Athena ever lost a battle, nope, not once. Not even in that weird, weaving contest against Arachne, the mortal who dared to outcraft the goddess and ended up... Well, we'll get to her in a future section. For now, Athena retreats to her chamber. No fanfare, no flocks of doves, just a goddess sitting by a pool of starlight, polishing her shield and writing wisdom into the world with every breath. And you? You drift quietly through a moment of balance where strength meets strategy, where war doesn't roar but thinks. You're gliding through twilight now, where Olympus glows in that golden hour haze and divine gossip floats on the breeze like incense. The gods are restless again. Not the war-waging kind of restless, more like romantic entanglement with apocalyptic consequences restless. At the center of this slightly tragic carousel spins Apollo, the golden boy of Olympus. And when I say golden, I mean literally. Sun-kissed hair, radiant smile, abs like a Doric column, and enough charm to make a harp blush. You find him lounging on a rock, plucking his lyre under a fig tree, probably composing a ballad about how beautiful his reflection looks today. He's the god of music, prophecy, healing, plague, archery, and poetry. Because why settle for one title when you can multitask like a cosmic influencer? But there's one thing Apollo can't master. Relationships. Oh, but he tries, and he fails. Spectacularly. Let's start with Daphne. Apollo, fresh off slaying a giant snake, as one does, mocks Eros, the tiny love god, for playing with bows. Eros, having the emotional intelligence of a caffeinated teenager with unlimited power, decides to teach Apollo a lesson. He shoots him with a golden arrow of love, aimed right at Daphne, a mortal nymph who very clearly does not want to be in a relationship. Then he hits Daphne with a lead arrow of repulsion, making her want to run from Apollo like he's a hinge date who lied about being 6 feet 3 inches. You watch from the treetops as Apollo chases her, earnestly, awkwardly, and increasingly creepily, through the forest, begging her to love him. Daphne prays to her river god father for an escape, and he answers by turning her into a laurel tree. Leaves sprout where her fingers were. Roots take hold where her feet fled. Apollo arrives just in time to hug the bark and whisper sweet nothings to a branch. Romantic? Not exactly. Creepy? Very. Still, he makes the laurel his sacred symbol. Poets and champions will one day wear laurel wreaths to honor her, and maybe to remind themselves that love should never feel like a pursuit scene. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The laurel wreath became a key symbol of achievement in ancient Greece. Victors at the Pythian Games, held in Apollo's honor, wore them instead of medals. Apollo's heartbreak literally crowned the heads of future poets and athletes. But here's your quirky tidbit. Apollo didn't just invent music. He was credited with creating the first music battle. Legend says he once challenged a satyr named Marsyas to a contest. Marsyas played the flute. Apollo, of course, played the lyre. Judges included the muses. Apollo won, then flayed Marsyas alive for daring to compete. So, not exactly jam session with the bros. Back to Apollo's love life, which continues to be a train wreck wrapped in a tragedy. Next up, Hyacinthus. A beautiful Spartan prince, young and radiant. Apollo loved him deeply, and for a while it was almost a happy story. They played discus together, which sounds like a romantic picnic until you remember that discus involves throwing giant metal plates through the air. One day, Apollo throws a discus. Hyacinthus runs to catch it, and whether it's fate, bad aim, or a jealous wind god, yes, that's a theory, the discus strikes Hyacinthus in the head. He dies in Apollo's arms. Devastated, Apollo cries over his body. From the spilled blood, a flower blooms, the hyacinth. Delicate, purple, and shaped like regret. Historians still argue whether the Hyacinthus myth reflects a cultural shift in attitudes toward male love, or whether it's a symbolic story of beauty, fragility, and mortality. Either way, it's one of the softest, saddest notes in Apollo's otherwise over-the-top saga. You drift beside him now, watching as he carves a song into the evening sky with his lyre. His eyes are distant. There's always someone he couldn't save. Daphne, Hyacinthus, even Coronis, the mortal woman who bore his son, Asclepius, the future god of healing. Coronis cheated on him, or maybe she didn't. The myths change depending on who's telling them. But Apollo, in a rage or grief, killed her, then felt so guilty that he rescued the unborn child from her funeral pyre. He gave Asclepius to the centaur Chiron to raise, who taught him the art of healing so well that one day Asclepius learned to bring the dead back to life. That, of course, annoyed Hades. Can't have someone disrupting the death industry. So Zeus, great parenting move here, struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. Apollo was furious. He threatened Olympus itself. Eventually they compromised. Asclepius would become a constellation, a symbol of medicine, and his staff entwined with a serpent still shows up in medical logos today. You sigh, drifting lower as Apollo continues to play. He's the kind of god who wants love like it's poetry. Beautiful, idealized, unattainable. But love in Greek myth never behaves. It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't follow chords. It stumbles. It bleeds. It turns into trees and flowers and fading stars. Apollo, for all his light, is always chasing shadows. And you? You close your eyes as his music ripples through the clouds, soft and silver, curling around you like a lullaby meant not to win, but simply to be heard. The melody of Apollo's lyre fades into the warm hush of early night, and you coast gently across Olympus where the air smells faintly of ambrosia and ancient mischief. The mood changes as you descend, less dreamy, more dramatic. Someone's definitely about to start a beauty contest, and it's not going to end well. Enter Aphrodite, born from sea foam, scandal, and one very traumatic castration. Remember when Cronus chopped off Uranus's... You know? Yeah. When those bits hit the ocean, they fizzed like a divine bath bomb, and from the foam rose Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, and utter chaos. You drift over a calm, sparkling sea. A giant shell crests the water, and there she is. Aphrodite glowing like sunset, smiling like she knows secrets the sun hasn't even heard yet. Fish leap out of the waves in applause. Doves swirl overhead. Somewhere, a harp plays itself out of sheer intimidation. And you? You float there slack-jawed like a mortal on their fifth scroll through her divine Instagram. The gods were not prepared. Zeus, fearing a godly brawl over who gets to marry her, quickly marries her off to Hephaestus, the only one not trying to flirt. He's kind, quiet, covered in soot, and, as we know, not Aphrodite's type. Because here's the thing, Aphrodite loves love. The fluttery kind. The forbidden kind. The messy, heart-thudding, sock-losing kind. She may be married to Hephaestus, but her heart, well, let's be real, her whole calendar, is usually with Ares, the god of war. It's passion and carnage, kisses and bruises, very Greek myth situationship energy. But tonight's chaos comes from a different corner of Olympus. It begins at a wedding. Not Aphrodite's. This time it's Peleus and Thetis, a mortal-immortal pairing. All the gods are invited except for Eris, the goddess of discord, which might have been a mistake. Eris shows up anyway and tosses a golden apple into the crowd, inscribed with 3 deadly words. For the fairest. Cue the slow-motion panic. 3 goddesses claim it. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom. And Aphrodite herself. Each is powerful. Each is divine. Each is not in the mood to lose. Here's your mainstream historical fact. This apple toss is the mythical trigger of the Trojan War. It's the original butterfly wing flap that eventually brings down empires. And it all starts with petty vanity and celestial peer pressure. So what do the goddesses do? They turn to Zeus. You decide, they say. But Zeus, in a rare moment of self-preservation, punts the responsibility to Paris, a mortal prince of Troy known for his looks and general cluelessness. You drift beside Paris as the goddesses appear before him, each offering a bribe. Hera promises political power, rule over all of Asia. Athena offers unmatched wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite smiles sweetly and says, I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world. Guess which one he picks. Paris gives the apple to Aphrodite. Athena rolls her eyes so hard the clouds darken. Hera stares like she's mentally listing every ancestor he's about to disappoint. Aphrodite, of course, is delighted. Problem is, the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen, who's already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But that's never stopped a Greek myth before. Aphrodite orchestrates a romantic meet-cute, read abduction, depending on which version you believe, and Helen ends up in Troy. Menelaus, not thrilled, rallies the Greek armies to get her back, and just like that, boom, Trojan War. Your quirky tidbit? According to some sources, Eris didn't just toss one apple. In some regional myths, she had a whole bag of them and just kept throwing them. A kind of divine dodgeball of discord. Total chaos bringer behavior. But back to Aphrodite. She's not evil. She doesn't plan destruction. But she's the embodiment of desire. And desire, unchecked, irresistible, causes things to happen. She doesn't need thunderbolts or spears. She just smiles and hearts crumble. You follow her now through the folds of Olympus, where roses bloom in her footsteps and hearts accelerate involuntarily. She visits mortals often, sometimes blessing them with beauty, other times dooming them with longing. One kiss from her could inspire 1,000 poems, or burn a city to the ground. And her children? Oh boy. She gives birth to Eros, the winged love god with a bow and arrows that start most problems and solve almost none. He's cute, mischievous, probably banned from several temples. He fires arrows of love and hate with equal enthusiasm and zero customer support. There's also Harmonia, goddess of harmony, who somehow grows up well-adjusted despite her mother being the source of 80% of Olympus's romantic disasters. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite came from the east, possibly modeled on Astarte, a Phoenician goddess of fertility and war. Her symbols, doves, mirrors, seashells, are found in both Mesopotamian and Mediterranean art. Was she imported, localized, or born purely from Greek foam? Scholars shrug and offer wine. You pass her temple now, roses twined around marble columns, love offerings placed like whispered prayers. A scarf, a poem, a wilted laurel. Some burned too bright. Others never had a chance. Aphrodite moves like smoke. She doesn't fix things. She stirs them. And as you float behind her in this mythic dusk, you realize she is the heartbeat of every bad decision, every stolen glance, every midnight wish cast into the sea. Love, it turns out, is not soft. It's wild and beautiful. And sometimes it throws a golden apple that starts a war. You drift now into a slower current, the kind that carries forge smoke and iron-scented air. Olympus dims slightly, shadows flickering gold and crimson, and the silence is pierced by the steady clank. Clank. Clank of a hammer on anvil. You're entering the forge of Hephaestus, and it's nothing like the rest of Olympus. No peacocks, no lyres. Just heat, steel, and the hypnotic rhythm of creation. The forge sits low on the slopes of Olympus, almost hidden. Part workshop, part volcano, and entirely alive. Sparks leap from the coals like fireflies trying to escape. Strange mechanical birds clatter in the rafters. Golden automatons, metal women with flowing hair and eyes like glowing sapphires, whir and serve tools in silence. And at the center of it all stands Hephaestus, god of fire, craftsmanship, invention, and long-suffering sighs. His back is strong, his hands are blistered, and his limp slows him not one bit as he moves from station to station, shaping the divine world with mortal patience. You remember his story. Cast from Olympus as a baby, by his own mother, Hera, because of his lameness. In some versions, he lands in the sea and is raised by gentle nymphs. In others, he falls for a full day and night before splashing down, bones broken, dignity gone. He doesn't come back in anger, he comes back in style. Hephaestus sends Hera a golden throne, gorgeous, gleaming, and secretly a trap. The moment she sits on it, she's stuck. Permanently. No release button. No divine undo spell. You giggle a little as you hover nearby, watching the gods panic while Hera fumes in place. They beg Hephaestus to free her, but he refuses. Petty? Maybe. Understandable? Definitely. Eventually, they bribe him back to Olympus. In some versions, they send Dionysus, god of wine, to get him drunk enough to agree. Picture it. The limping god being carried home on a donkey, swaying with laughter, wine sloshing, sparks trailing behind like a firefly parade. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths in ancient cultures were often both feared and revered. Working with fire and metal was considered mystical, dangerous, even sacred. Hephaestus embodies that duality, humble laborer and unmatched creator. And here's your quirky tidbit. Hephaestus is said to have built tripod robots, three-legged rolling automatons that carried wine or messages through Olympus. Literal ancient AI assistants, thousands of years before Silicon Valley had its first toga party. But even with all his brilliance, Hephaestus' personal life is complicated. Let's talk about his marriage to Aphrodite, arranged not out of love but politics. Beauty meets blacksmith. Fire meets desire. What could go wrong? Everything. Aphrodite falls for Ares, god of war. the flashier, sexier option with zero impulse control. They begin a torrid affair sneaking around Olympus like teenagers with divine curfews. But Hephaestus finds out. Oh, he finds out. And he doesn't yell. He doesn't rage. He builds. He crafts a net so fine, so invisible, that it could trap sunlight. One night he catches Aphrodite and Ares mid-fling, wraps them in the unbreakable net, and drags them, still tangled, into the center of the gods' court for all to see. Cue the gasps, the awkward coughs. Apollo probably slow claps. Hermes, in most versions, just grins and says he wouldn't mind being in Ares' position. It's petty, it's public, and it almost feels like justice. But then again, did it fix anything? Not really. Aphrodite keeps being Aphrodite. Ares goes back to sharpening his sword. And Hephaestus? He returns to his forge. He always returns to his forge. Because that's what he does. He builds. He shapes. He makes beauty out of pain and weapons out of heartbreak. You float by a wall where his greatest creations hang. The armor of Achilles, the chains that bind Prometheus, a shield etched with the whole cosmos. Each piece glows with silent intensity, like the emotion he never speaks out loud. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus represents the outsider, the god who is never fully accepted despite his value. Some suggest his myths reflect ancient discomfort with physical disability. Others see him as a quiet rebellion, proof that strength doesn't need perfection. Tonight, you watch him sit beside his anvil, wiping soot from his brow. A mechanical owl perches nearby, its eyes blinking in sync with the dying coals. Hephaestus hums to himself, maybe a lullaby from his nymph mothers. Maybe just the rhythm of fire and steel. He doesn't need applause, he doesn't chase love. He just makes. And you, floating in the warmth of his forge, finally understand. Even among gods obsessed with power and beauty, the one who builds something lasting has the loudest legacy of all. The forge's glow fades behind you now, softening into the moonlight that filters down through Olympus's high pine groves. The night here isn't quiet. It pulses. There's movement in the branches, rustling in the brush, and somewhere, a silver arrow thunks softly into bark. You're in Artemis's domain now. Goddess of the hunt, the moon, wild places, and absolutely no uninvited guests. Tread lightly. She doesn't do small talk, or dating, or compliments unless they're about deer. You drift through her forest, a tapestry of shadows and moonbeams. No temples, no golden thrones. Just trees, streams, and the distant howl of a wolf. Probably one she raised herself. Her realm is wild but clean, feral but balanced. It smells like pine needles and cool moss, and for once there's no bickering gods nearby. Just you and the hush of things that know how to hide. Artemis appears suddenly like moonlight through clouds, young, graceful, and deadly. She wears a short tunic, practical boots, and a quiver that never empties. Her hair's tied back, her bow already strung, and her expression says, "Say something dumb, I dare you." She's often described as eternally maiden, which in Greek myth terms means she takes no interest in romance. Not yours, not anyone else's. Which is fine until people forget that no isn't a challenge. Let's talk about Actaeon. He's a hunter, mortal, proud. One day he stumbles, quite literally, into Artemis's sacred spring, where she's bathing with her nymphs. Completely by accident, according to some versions. According to others, maybe he was looking on purpose. Either way, she sees him. He sees her. And in the next heartbeat, she turns him into a stag. No dramatic monologue, no countdown. Just poof. Antlers, hooves, fur, panic. Actaeon runs, heart pounding, until he hears barking. His own hounds, loyal and well-trained, don't recognize him. They chase, they catch, they kill. You don't watch. You just hear the snap of bone beneath cedar trees. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Artemis was widely worshipped across Greece, especially in Delos and Ephesus, where she was seen not just as huntress, but as protector of women and children. Her role bridged the wild and the maternal, midwife and predator in the same breath. Your quirky tidbit? Some cults of Artemis celebrated her with wild nighttime dances in the forest, women leaping over fires dressed like deer, honoring both her nurturing and savage sides. Moonlit raves, basically, with less EDM and more fox pelts. Back in the woods, Artemis stalks through the underbrush with her retinue of nymphs. They laugh quietly, leap over logs like shadows with ponytails. None of them age, none of them marry. They're her chosen girls, and they are fiercely loyal. But even Artemis's boundaries get tested. Once the gods tried to pressure her into marrying Orion, a giant and renowned hunter. For a while, they got along, maybe even too well. In one version, she loved him. In another, she didn't. But Zeus and Apollo feared that she might. So Apollo, ever the meddling brother, sets a trap. One day he points out a tiny figure swimming far off in the sea, daring Artemis to hit it with her bow. She does, because of course she does. She never misses. When she swims out to retrieve the body, she realizes it's Orion. The grief is silent, wordless. She carries him up into the sky, places him among the stars as a constellation, and never speaks of it again. Historians still debate whether Artemis represents female independence or an unreachable ideal. Was she a symbol of freedom, or a mythological way to define women by what they reject? Love, motherhood, softness? Some call her empowering, others lonely. But tonight she's neither, she's hunting. You drift beside her in silence as she moves like silver wind, every step deliberate. She aims, fires, breathes. She doesn't need praise, she doesn't want offerings. She just needs the wild to stay wild. Even the moon above seems to slow for her, hovering in deference, its pale face softened with respect. She touches it sometimes, or maybe it just leans in when she passes. And you, lucky to witness all this, can't help but feel the pull. Not of love, not of fear, but of distance. The sacred kind. The kind that reminds you some things were never meant to be touched. Back on Olympus, the gods toast each other. But here in the forest, Artemis gazes up at her stars and says nothing. Stillness returns. A deer glides past. Somewhere far off, a brook murmurs your name. You exhale. This part of Olympus doesn't scream or seduce. It listens. And if you're quiet, truly quiet, Artemis might let you stay a little longer. You leave the stillness of Artemis's woods behind, trading moonlit silence for something much louder, looser, and a whole lot tipsier. The air thickens with the scent of wine, ripe grapes, wildflowers, and yes, just a little madness. The forest fades, and in its place rises a lush, swaying world of ivy-covered thrones, ecstatic drums, and barefoot dancing. You've entered the chaotic, glittering orbit of Dionysus. You catch your breath as he stumbles past you, goblet in hand, a leopard trailing behind like a particularly stylish pet. Dionysus doesn't walk. He glides, half laughing, half floating, leaving overturned goblets and questionable decisions in his wake. His robes are purple and gold, his cheeks are flushed, and his crown is a wreath of vines that seems to grow a little more with every step. He's the god of wine, yes, but also of madness, theater, fertility, transformation, and very often screaming in ecstatic confusion. He's also the only Olympian god born of a mortal woman, Semele, a Theban princess who made the mistake of asking Zeus to reveal his true form. Zeus, not really the think before you explode type, shows up in full thunder god mode and instantly vaporizes her. Bit of a buzzkill. But Semele was pregnant, and Zeus, panicking like a dad who's really committed to his legacy, sews the unborn Dionysus into his own thigh until the baby's ready. You heard that right. You float there in stunned silence as Zeus unbuttons his metaphysical pants and pulls out a giggling baby god. And somehow, that's not the weirdest part of Dionysus' origin story. Because Hera, who always keeps receipts, isn't done with him. She sends mad kings and monster nannies and even pirates after him. But Dionysus always escapes, shape-shifting, charming, bewildering his enemies until they dance themselves into the ground or end up transformed into dolphins. Seriously, dolphins. One band of pirates tried to kidnap him for ransom, not realizing the toddler in their hold was also the god of divine intoxication. He turned their boat into vines and made the mast ooze wine. They jumped overboard. Poof, dolphins forever. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dionysus was worshipped in mystery cults across the Greek world. His rites, called bacchanalia by the Romans, involved music, masks, wine, and an almost hypnotic release of emotion. People would gather in forests or caves to lose themselves, to shatter the boundary between God and mortal body and soul. Your quirky tidbit? Dionysus had a chariot pulled by panthers. Because why ride horses when you can be fabulous and slightly terrifying? But Dionysus isn't just a party boy. He's a trickster, a traveler, and unlike most gods, a god of outsiders. You follow him now through the cities of Asia Minor, where he's said to have wandered in disguise, preaching his rites. Not everyone welcomed him. One king, Pentheus, mocked him, banned his rituals, and tried to spy on the Maenads, Dionysus' frenzied female followers. He dressed in women's clothes to sneak into their dances, thinking he'd catch them in scandal. What he got instead? Ripped to shreds, literally, by his own mother, Agave, driven mad by Dionysus' divine aura. She believed she was killing a lion. She was not. You float high above that moment, unwilling to look too closely. Madness, when gifted by a god, doesn't come with warning labels. Historians still argue whether Dionysus represents a foreign god adopted into the Greek pantheon, perhaps of Thracian or Eastern origin. He's unlike the other Olympians. He arrives late. He wears strange clothes. He breaks the rules. He speaks for those society leaves out. Women, theater kids, wanderers, the mad, the grieving. In Athens, he's honored with theater festivals, and it's through his influence that tragedy and comedy are born. Writers would present plays in his honor grappling with fate, hubris, and wine-soaked catharsis. When you watch a heartbreaking film today and feel somehow cleansed by the end, that's Dionysus, just in modern clothes. And his followers? Oh, they're intense. The Maenads dance through the trees in frenzied trances, hair wild, hands sticky with wine and sometimes blood. They're divine and dangerous, free and frightening. They remind you that to lose control is sometimes, to the Greeks, a kind of divine experience. Even now you sway slightly, pulled by invisible drums and the smell of spiced wine. It's tempting, isn't it? To let go, to fall into rhythm, to laugh until you forget who you are. Dionysus smiles from across a firelit clearing. He knows, he always knows. But he isn't just indulgence. He's also resurrection. Later myths say Dionysus descended into the underworld to save his mother, Semele. He brings her back, grants her immortality, and seats her on Olympus. No one else does that. Not Zeus, not Hades. Just the god of madness holding his mother's hand in the dark and walking her home. You didn't expect tenderness here, did you? That's the trick of Dionysus. He's not chaos for chaos's sake. He's the god of what lies beneath. Grief under laughter, pain behind the mask, freedom in surrender. And tonight, as the vines curl around your ankles and the stars pulse to a beat you can't quite name, you understand? Sometimes to feel too much. Sometimes to... The music fades behind you now, like a distant echo from a dream you're not sure you enjoyed, or just barely survived. You leave the wild behind and descend downward, much farther than you expect. Past cloud, past mountain, past mortal ground, through the dark roots of the world itself. You've arrived in the underworld, but don't panic. You're not dead, just visiting, like a tourist. A very polite, very quiet tourist. Because this is Hades' realm, and Hades does not enjoy unexpected company. The air here is still, heavy, and weirdly clean. Not spooky exactly, more like an eternal library with very strict rules and no windows. The rivers murmur instead of rush. The shades of the dead glide rather than walk. Everything is muted, gray, respectful, and at the center of it all, on a throne of obsidian and silence, sits Hades, god of the underworld. Not the devil, not a villain, just serious, introverted, running the most thankless department in all of Olympus where no one claps and nobody leaves. His helm rests beside him, the helm of darkness, which lets him turn invisible, perfect for someone who prefers not to mingle. He's not cruel, but he is just, which, depending on who you ask, is even scarier. Let's be clear, Hades doesn't kill people. He doesn't send plagues, throw thunderbolts, or turn anyone into shrubs. His job is simple: keep the dead where they belong. No overtime, no mistakes. Your mainstream historical fact? The ancient Greeks didn't actually fear Hades himself. They feared saying his name. He was often referred to in euphemisms like the wealthy one, Pluton, because all wealth, minerals, gems, even grain, comes from below. It wasn't fear of evil, it was fear of inevitability. But there's a quirky fringe tidbit too. Some myths suggest Hades had a pet named Macaria, a daughter who personified blessed death. Peaceful, gentle passing. She never got temples, but she did get a quiet following. The Greeks, despite their drama, appreciated a dignified exit. As you drift deeper, the geography of the underworld unfolds around you. The river Styx, black and glassy, where oaths are sworn and broken promises echo forever. The Acheron, river of pain, quiet, steady, and somehow always cold. The Phlegethon, river of fire, don't touch it. Seriously. The Cocytus, river of wailing, yes, it sounds exactly like that. And the Lethe, river of forgetfulness. Dip your hand in and names begin to slip. Your own too. On the shore stands Charon, the ferryman. Hooded, bony, with hands like driftwood and a voice like creaking doors. He doesn't speak unless you've got a coin, preferably two, one for each eye. Ancient Greek burial tradition, payment for passage. Beyond the rivers lies the great sorting hall of death. Not quite judgment, but placement. The good and heroic go to the Elysian fields, where the breeze is warm and the food tastes like nostalgia. The okay but not great people get asphodel meadows, fine but bland. Eternal mediocrity. And the truly wicked are sentenced to Tartarus, a pit so deep even the gods get nervous saying its name. That's where the Titans were banished, and Sisyphus, cursed to push his boulder uphill forever. And Tantalus, who stands thirsty in a pool that recedes every time he bends to drink. Eternal punishment. Or very poetic metaphors, depending on how you look at it. But you're not here for them. You're here for Hades. And surprisingly, you find him tending to his garden. Yes, a garden. Pale flowers, iron-colored trees, sprigs of herbs that only grow in the land of the dead. He clips them carefully, humming softly. He doesn't look up, but he knows you're here. And then, she arrives. Persephone. Spring incarnate. Bright, blooming, full of impossible color, in a place built of shadow. She walks beside Hades and the garden suddenly looks alive. Not green, but golden. Not cheerful, but content. You remember the myth. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, had a daughter, Persephone, gentle and radiant. One day Hades saw her and, well, he took her. Or invited her. Or maybe she chose to go. The myths shift like sand. Some say it was a kidnapping, some say it was fate. But Persephone ate the seeds, 6 pomegranate seeds, and that meant she could never fully leave. So a deal was struck. Half the year she stays below, with Hades as queen. The other half she returns to her mother and the world blossoms. This is how the Greeks explained the seasons. Winter was Demeter grieving. Spring was Persephone returning. It wasn't science. It was storytelling that made the wind feel personal. Historians still argue whether Persephone's tale is about empowerment or imprisonment. Was she tricked? Or did she choose a throne in the dark? Either way, she becomes more than a flower girl. She becomes queen of the underworld. You float nearby as she speaks softly to the spirits. She's kind. They listen. Hades watches her with something that could be called love. Slow, steady, never jealous. No other god in Olympus has a marriage that works this well. Maybe it's because they each let the other exist. No expectations, no golden chains. You glance at Hades once more, expecting cold detachment, but instead you find someone deeply tired. Not of Persephone, of everything else. Of being misunderstood. Of always being the shadow to someone else's lightning bolt. He never wanted Olympus, he just wanted order. And maybe a wife who sees him, and he got both. So now, as Persephone leans her head against his shoulder and the garden exhales, you understand? The underworld isn't punishment. It's balance. Life needs death. Light needs shadow. Summer needs winter. And above all, even the gods need rest. You rise slowly now from the cool hush of the underworld. Not jolted, but gently drawn upward, like a leaf rising on a breeze. The darkness softens. Your ears pop. Color seeps back into the world. Greens, golds, the faint pink of orchard blossoms. You've crossed back into the land of the living, and someone is very emotional about it. It's Demeter. She's pacing through meadows with grass scorched brown, her hair unbraided, her eyes stormy. Birds don't sing around her. Crops wither. The wind won't make eye contact, because Persephone, her daughter, is gone. Again. You hover just above a crumbling wheat field, and you can feel it. This isn't regular sadness. This is cosmic mother grief. Demeter isn't just missing her daughter, she's mourning spring itself. And the world reflects it. Here's the thing. When Persephone descends to the underworld each year, Demeter doesn't take it well. She withdraws her blessings from the earth. No growth, no bloom, no harvest. The trees hold their breath. The soil sulks. That's autumn, then winter. Only when Persephone returns does Demeter begin to breathe again. Her smile alone can coax seeds from the dirt. That's how the Greeks explained the seasons, not with tilted axes and elliptical orbits, but with a mother's heartbreak and a daughter's annual homecoming. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most sacred religious rites in ancient Greece, were dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. They promised initiates a hopeful afterlife, one where the dead, like Persephone, might also return. Their actual rituals were secret, but we know they involved torches, grain, and a dramatic reenactment of Persephone's descent and return. And your quirky tidbit? The festival included a nighttime procession where participants carried torches through the dark, crying out for Persephone like concerned partygoers, searching for their friend who wandered off. It was grief theater, deeply moving, oddly communal, and weirdly modern in its vulnerability. But let's rewind. Because you didn't see how Persephone got taken in the first place. She was picking flowers, that's it. A field of color, bees buzzing, her laughter caught in the wind. And then, a crack. The ground splits. A golden chariot pulled by dark horses bursts from the earth, driven by Hades himself. In some versions, she screams. In others, she's silent, already staring into the abyss with the calm of someone who knows destiny when it arrives. Either way, she's gone. Demeter searches everywhere. Day becomes night. Mortals suffer. The gods grow nervous. Finally, Zeus intervenes, which, let's be honest, is like asking a cat to broker a peace treaty between two Rottweilers. He sends Hermes, ever the smooth talker, to fetch Persephone. But it's too late. She's eaten the pomegranate seeds. Just 6. enough to tie her to the underworld forever. Zeus proposes a compromise. Classic him. Persephone will spend half the year with Hades, half with Demeter, and thus the cycle begins. You drift now through those seasonal changes, the cold crispness of Persephone's descent, the slow blooming of her return, the scent of turned soil in spring, the sleepy sigh of the last apple falling in autumn. The gods feel distant during all this. Only Demeter and Persephone seem human, because theirs is a story of love, not lightning, of holding on and letting go, of grief that doesn't fade, but learns to wait. Historians still argue whether Persephone's story is one of abduction or ascension. Was she stolen by death, or did she choose to wear the crown? Feminist scholars reinterpret her as a dual-natured goddess, life-bringer and queen of the dead, both victim and ruler, seed and soil. You pass a mortal woman kneeling in a fallow field, whispering prayers to Demeter. Her hands are cracked, her eyes are hopeful. She's planting nothing, just waiting for the right month. She believes, as the ancients did, that the world must rest before it blooms again. And up above, in the orchard where the first buds are cracking open, Persephone steps back into the sun. She's older now, not in age, but in presence. She's been below. She's seen things. She wears flowers, yes. But she walks like someone who has made peace with shadows. Demeter runs to her, and the world turns green. The bees return. The rivers thaw. Bread tastes sweeter. Even the olives wink at the sun. You float gently over it all, the warm air hugging you like a blanket fresh from the dryer. There is relief here, restoration, a kind of divine exhale. And Persephone? She doesn't speak. She just touches a dying branch, and it blossoms. You rise with the spring winds now, feeling the sunlight stretch across mountaintops and ripple over valleys. Olympus glows a little warmer, the gods a little quieter, perhaps even content. For now. But not for long. Because whenever things start to settle in Greek myth, someone invents a hero. And tonight you meet them. The semi-gods, the demigods, the impossible task-doers who are only half divine, but 100% overcommitted. You're floating right into the golden age of heroism, which, as you'll see, is less about heroics and more about trauma, revenge quests, and complicated dad issues. Let's start with Heracles. No, not Hercules, that's his Roman stage name. Heracles is the real, deeply unhinged Greek version. You find him now as a baby, giggling in his cradle, next to two enormous snakes Hera sent to kill him. Instead of crying, baby Heracles grabs one in each hand and strangles them like plush toys. His mother screams. Zeus smiles. Hera files another divine HR complaint under unresolved. You already know how Hera feels about Zeus's side children. Spoiler, not great. Heracles grows up strong, too strong, and also terribly unlucky. Hera drives him into a madness, during which he kills his wife and children. It's a horror beyond words, and it's what starts his path to redemption. To atone, he's given 12 impossible labors, each more ludicrous than the last. You hover above him as he slays the Nemean lion with skin too thick to pierce, so he strangles it, then uses its own claw to skin it. Hardcore. Cleanse the Augean stables in a single day by rerouting 2 rivers through them like a divine plumber with 0 patience. Captures the Erymanthian boar, wrangles the Cyrenean hind, fetches the apples of the Hesperides, and kidnaps Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of the underworld, without hurting him. The good boy lives. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Heracles was Greece's most beloved hero, not just for strength, but for suffering. His pain was public. His labors were penance. The Greeks loved their flawed icons. Heracles was a walking apology in lion skin. And the quirky tidbit, he once dressed as a woman and served Queen Omphale in Lydia, spinning wool in her chamber while she wore his club and lion pelt. It wasn't a punishment, it was complicated. Even the gods took a break from judging that one. Next on your tour, Perseus, the headliner of every Don't Look Directly at It campaign. His story, classic origin mess. His grandfather hears a prophecy that his grandson will kill him, so he locks his daughter Danae in a bronze tower. Zeus, ever persistent, visits her as Golden Rain, and voila, baby Perseus. Fast forward, and Perseus is sent to fetch the head of Medusa, a gorgon with snakes for hair whose gaze turns people to stone. Perseus gets help. Athena gives him a shield, Hermes lends winged sandals, and he borrows a cap of invisibility for good measure. You float beside him now as he tiptoes through the cave, using his mirrored shield to avoid looking directly at Medusa. He strikes, the head comes off, her blood births. Pegasus, the flying horse. You didn't expect that, did you? On his way home, he rescues Andromeda, chained to a rock, offered to a sea monster. He kills the beast, marries her, and casually turns her would-be suitor to stone, using Medusa's head. Just a little problem-solving via petrification. Historians still argue whether Perseus represents a civilized hero defeating chaos, or just an old PR story for a local Greek dynasty trying to legitimize itself with divine lineage. Then there's Theseus, slayer of the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull who lived in a labyrinth. So confusing even Google Maps would give up. Theseus volunteers as tribute, sails to Crete, and uses a ball of string, thank you Ariadne, to trace his steps. He kills the Minotaur, escapes the maze, then, classic hero move, abandons Ariadne on an island. Oof, the quirky bit? Theseus forgets to change his ship's sails from black, meaning dead, to white, meaning alive, when returning home. His father, King Aegis, sees the black sails and leaps into the sea in grief, hence the Aegean Sea. Smooth move, Theseus. Then there's Atalanta, the fastest runner in Greece, abandoned at birth and raised by bears. She joins a boar hunt, kills it, and challenges suitors to a race. If they lose, they die. One man, Hippomenes, wins by dropping golden apples to distract her. She marries him, but later they offend the gods by hooking up in a sacred temple and are turned into lions. Apparently, passion plus divine furniture equals no good. Your floating now carries you above Jason and the Argonauts, a sailing squad before sailing was cool. Their mission? Retrieve the Golden Fleece. Along the way, Jason wins the love of Medea, a powerful sorceress who helps him, then is betrayed by him. Her revenge? Epic, terrible, and best left to another tale. Greek heroes aren't clean-cut. They're not always good. They stumble, they lie, they regret, but they try. And the Greeks saw in them a mirror, not a lesson, but a process. Pain leading to growth, hubris to wisdom, power to humility. And so you float above them all now. Heracles resting by a stream, Perseus polishing his mirrored shield, Atalanta stretching in feline form beneath an olive tree. The gods watch them, sometimes amused, sometimes horrified. Because the heroes? They're the bridge between mortal and divine, and unlike the gods, they have something to lose. Which means they're realer. You drift now across a vast starlit sea, quiet, moonlit, and seemingly endless. The wind is soft. The waves whisper. You're not quite sure where you are anymore, only that something important is happening. There's a ship below, a lone figure at its bow. He looks exhausted, determined, lost, and his name? Odysseus. You've reached the tail end of Greek myth's greatest road trip, aka the Odyssey, and unlike those tightly packed hero quests you've already seen, this one stretches, it wanders. It feels like a dream you keep waking up from only to fall into again. Let's rewind for a second. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, didn't want to go to war. He pretended to be mad when summoned to fight at Troy, plowing his fields while sowing salt. But they called his bluff, dragged him to the front lines, and he fought bravely for 10 long years. And now, he's just trying to go home. You float beside his ship, the wind never blowing quite the right direction, and you watch as what should have been a 2-week commute turns into a decade-long odyssey of monsters, gods, and really bad timing. His first detour, the Ciconas who ambush him, then the Lotus Eaters who try to feed his crew magic flowers that make them forget home entirely. You drift past them lying in warm sand, eyes blank, smiles soft, temptation by apathy. Then Polyphemus, the Cyclops, one-eyed, massive, cannibalistic. Odysseus and his men end up trapped in his cave. One by one, the monster eats them like popcorn shrimp. So what does Odysseus do? He gets Polyphemus drunk, blinds him with a burning stake, and escapes by hiding under sheep. You laugh quietly at that image. Greek warriors clutching the underbellies of sheep as they shuffle past a blind, bellowing Cyclops. It shouldn't work, but it does. Odysseus, however, can't help himself. As they sail away, he taunts Polyphemus, shouting his name. Tell them it was Odysseus of Ithaca who did this. Bad move, because Polyphemus' dad? Poseidon. And now the god of the sea has a personal vendetta. Storms, shipwrecks, delays. You name it. Your mainstream historical fact? The Odyssey wasn't just literature, it was education. Recited in schools, performed at festivals. Homer's work taught Greek youth not just about gods and monsters, but about cleverness, hubris, and homecoming. Quirky tidbit? The Cyclops myth may have originated from ancient Greeks discovering dwarf elephant skulls, whose large central nasal cavity could have looked like a single eye socket. Add a little imagination. Instant monster. Odysseus' journey continues. You watch him. Get blown to Aeolia, where the king gives him a bag of winds. His crew, thinking it's gold, open it too soon and get blown back to the start. Survive the cannibals of Laestrygonia, where one of the giants picks up a man and eats him like a chicken wing. Land on Circe's island, where half his crew is turned into pigs. He wins her over, with Hermes' help, and they end up staying a full year. You drift above their lazy paradise. Circe's forest teeming with tame lions and slightly confused ex-sailors. She's smart, powerful, and honestly, a little overqualified for this island gig. Eventually, Odysseus remembers Ithaca exists and leaves. But before he can sail again, he's told, you must go to the underworld. And he does, alone. You revisit the river Lethe, the fields of Asphodel, the shades of fallen friends and long-dead heroes. He speaks to Tiresias, the blind prophet, learns what lies ahead, sees his mother, breaks down in tears. Then he returns to the living world, changed. Not fully, but slightly. It's how grief works. You float alongside him as he braves. The sirens whose songs nearly lure him to his doom. He plugs his men's ears with wax and ties himself to the mast so he can hear the song without dying. Genius. And deeply extra. Scylla and Charybdis, the monster with 6 heads in the giant whirlpool. He sacrifices a few men to pass through. No hero gets clean victories here. Thrinacia, where his crew eats the sacred cattle of the sun god. Zeus is furious. Storms destroy the ship. All are lost. Only Odysseus survives. He washes ashore on Ogygia, where the nymph Calypso offers him eternal youth and godhood, if he stays. For 7 years he does. But he never stops dreaming of Ithaca. And so, at long last, the gods release him. He lands in disguise. Reunites with his son. Enters his home where suitors have been feasting, assuming him dead. With calm fury, he strings his bow and slaughters them all. You float beside Penelope, his wife, watching her test him with one last riddle. About the bed only they knew, carved from the roots of an olive tree. He answers. And just like that, he's home. Historians still argue whether Odysseus is a hero or a warning. He lies, cheats, leaves chaos behind him. But he also tries, fails, learns, returns. He's not perfect. He's real. And you, drifting above this final scene, Odysseus asleep finally in his own bed, feel the story settling in your bones. Because after monsters, gods, storms, and songs, sometimes the greatest journey is coming home. The stars above Ithaca flicker softly now, as if exhaling the final breath of a long, winding tale. You float gently upward, higher and higher, leaving behind the hero's bed, the quiet olive grove, the sea lapping gently at the shore. All the noise, the wars, the labors, the gods hurling thunderbolts, the monsters roaring in mythic caves, has faded. What remains is a hush. Even Olympus, high above the clouds, is calm tonight. The thrones are empty. The forges cooled, the vineyards still. Somewhere, Dionysus sleeps off a century-long feast, and Artemis polishes her arrows with moonlight. Hephaestus's hammers are silent. Apollo's lyre rests untouched. And in the soft underworld garden, Persephone brushes earth from her hands, while Hades murmurs something only the dead hear. You've heard so many stories. Tales that twisted through love, fury, prophecy, vanity, cleverness, madness. Gods that roared, mortals that wept, monsters that lurked just beyond understanding. You walked through seasons shaped by longing, and across oceans ruled by mood swings. And yet, through all that chaos, there was a rhythm, a pattern, a mother letting go, a daughter returning, a hero coming home. Maybe the myths weren't meant to teach anything final. Maybe they weren't written to be solved. Maybe they were simply made to remind us that even in the noise of divine nonsense, there's still something profoundly human underneath it all. So now, as you float in the slow space between stories, you let your limbs get heavier. Your breath slows. You feel the warmth of distant hearth fires, the scent of laurel, olive oil, sea salt. The gods sleep, and you are allowed to as well. Let the myth dissolve like morning fog. Let the monsters curl up like tired dogs. Let the heroes hang their cloaks. You are not in Olympus anymore. You are wherever dreams soften and stretch. No more thunder. No more lions. No more golden apples. Just stillness. Just sleep.